of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, just a reminder, we have the sign-up sheet over here if you want to make a public comment.
Okay, the first item is the adoption of the agenda.
I move to adopt the agenda as presented.
Second.
All those in favor? 7-0. The appointment of the clerk of the board.
I move to appoint Joni Jantz as clerk of the board and Dr. David Decker as deputy clerk of the board for the 2020 to 2021 school year.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor? 7-0. Appoint a board treasurer.
I move to appoint Jane Nichols as the treasurer for the 2020-2021 year.
Second.
All those in favor? 7-0. Public comment?
Right.
David Jackson?
Do I stand right here?
No, stand right there.
We'll keep it 3 minutes. Timely.
Yeah. I think I got the timer over here for you.
All right, you ready?
I'm ready.
Distinguished board members and superintendent, good evening. Thank you for allowing me to voice my support in favor of reopening schools for the 2021 school year. These are unprecedented times, and I know the burden of making the best decision is weighing heavily on your minds and in your hearts. In general, all parents desire for their children to learn and be well educated. We work hard at providing a loving support structure so that they have the best chance to live safe, healthy, and productive lives. I recognize that the COVID-19 epidemic presents any reasonable person or decision-making entity with extraordinary risk and doubt. The public is wrestling with the fear of possibly contracting a life-threatening illness while worrying about their jobs and providing enough food during times of self-isolation. A complex of this magnitude is challenging, the well-resourced and resourceless alike. For some, the cognitive strain has been tough, but manageable. For others, the strain is bearing down relentlessly. How long can some in our community bear this burden without relief? During this pandemic, I have seen the zero-risk bias in full effect. It is a tendency to prefer the complete elimination of a risk in a subpart or even when alternative options produce a greater overall reduction in risk. It often manifests in cases where decision makers address problems concerning health, safety, and the environment. In short, people feel better if the risk is eradicated instead of being merely mitigated. If we follow these desire to simplify the situation and keep schools closed or move to an online format, we reduce the risk of COVID-19 being transmitted via USD 373 to zero, since the buildings will be closed. And I understand how this can be a viable and attractive option for some. But how do you evaluate and accept the risk you create by closing school, foregoing our kids the chance of a proper in-person education, or forcing parents to comply with online school directives? While some will adjust, others simply will not. Are we prepared to induce added strain? From my vantage point, we can not simply eliminate the threat of COVID-19. I believe with extensive planning and implementing mitigating measures, we can have a successful school year with students in school and minimize the risk to a level of acceptability. My kids are enrolled in special education service. Because of their need for these services, I believe they are best served by in-school instruction. Learning while staying at home poses several challenges for my family. How much quality teaching will my kids actually get? Since I work, will their teachers be available in the evening? Moving forward, I believe it would be best served, if possible, to offer parents a choice between online and in-person school. While the statistics of the 1,588 responses support physically intended, we should do our best to give choices to accommodate as many viewpoints as possible. Of all the states with plans to reopen, 100% have SARS-CoV-2 protections in place. 82% support parent choice, and 52% support teacher-staff choice. I will be praying for our school's leadership, staff, and employees as the decision is made and implemented. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Oh, Draper?
I'm going to try to do this through my mask. My name is Hope Graver, and I am the parent of 2 USD 373 elementary schoolers and the spouse of a teacher at Chisholm. I want to start by acknowledging that I don't envy your job as members of the school board right now. A lot of decisions need to be made in a short amount of time. I want to encourage you to look seriously at scientific data and the guidelines from the CDC and recommendations from them as well. First, I want to draw you to 2 recent articles relating to the safety of in-person education. The first is a recent story about South Korea. They began reopening schools only to have to almost immediately shutter their doors once again because of a spike in new cases of COVID-19. This is extremely concerning because they had significantly fewer active cases than we currently have in Kansas prior to opening schools and were much more proactive about masks and other safety measures. The second story is about 3 teachers who were diagnosed with COVID-19 while teaching summer school in Arizona. They wore masks and gloves and maintained as much distance as possible and still contracted the virus. One of the 3 is dead and the other 2 are still experiencing significant symptoms after their initial diagnosis, many weeks. You've likely seen these stories already, but if not, please look them up. They provide strong anecdotal evidence for either a delayed start to the school year or beginning the school year entirely online. I feel very strongly that Newton needs to provide at least an optional online program for families that choose that for their students. With over $6 million allocated to our county to aid in adjustments to our educational programs, an online-only option should be very doable, and we should be able to make it accessible even to those without internet or other technology at home. As we continue to see rising cases in Harvey County, virtual options need to be a high priority for student, teacher, and staff safety, as CDC guidelines recommend that communities see a decrease in cases for 2 weeks as a significant indicator of when it is safe to make changes in our level of caution. On a personal level, I am not comfortable sending my sons or husband back into the classroom right now. I know I'm not alone in my anxiety. We have one shot to make our district a shining example of what can be done when we work together and make safety a priority for all of our students, for our teachers, our staff, and for our wider community. Please err on the side of caution when it comes to making plans and decisions about the upcoming school year. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, the next item on the agenda is the consent agenda.
I move to approve consent agenda items A through G.
Second.
Moved and seconded, all those in favor? 7-0. Old business approved Opportunity Academy staff handbook. Okay.
I move to approve the 2020-2021 Opportunity Academy staff handbook as presented.
Second. Moved and seconded, any discussion? All those in favor? 7-0. Act on resolution of authority for penny cash fund, resolution of authorizing penny cash funds to Newton High School and district office.
I move to approve the bills as presented.
Okay.
Those bills, we're down to
4B.
4B. So we did the consent agenda, so scroll down to 4B.
So we would try that resolution.
I'll move to.
We're going to cash.
Jen, is good.
Yeah. All right, so I'll say on this one.
Jen, you want to?
Yep, I got it. Move to adopt resolution 2021-7-2 of authority of petty cash funds, resolution 2021-7-3 authorizing petty cash funds for Newton High School, and resolution 2021-7-4 authorizing petty cash funds for district office.
Second.
Moved and seconded, all those in favor? 7. All right, under new business, we'll go through these and just do a roll method. So you'll start, and then we can second, and then next time you get to start. So, okay, go ahead.
I move to approve resolution 2021-7-1 designating eligible financial institutions as depositories.
Second.
All those in favor? 7-0.
Can you hold on, can you pause just a minute?
Yep.
You're in a different order than I am.
5A?
5A, okay.
That's out of
That was-
We did resolution designating eligible financial institutions.
Okay, that was Luke and,
That was I motion, Lou second.
okay.
Next item. Okay. Move to adopt resolution 2021-07-5, waiver of fixed asset accounting and general accepted accounting principles for 2020-21.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor? 7-0. Steve?
I move to adopt resolution 2021-7-6, establishing Board of Education meeting dates, times, and location as presented.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor? 7-0. 5B?
I move to adopt resolution 2021-7-7 to establish home rule by the Board of Education.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor? 7-0. 5E?
I move to adopt resolution 2021-07-8 for rescinding policy statements found in ordinance.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor?
This is
7-0.
F.
Yes.
That was,
Okay.
That was E, now we're on F.
So F is the Hudson community, that one, in a different order.
It's the gift fund.
You're on, yeah, 5F.
Oh, I see, okay. Active resolution for USD 372. Okay. I move to adopt the resolution 2021 for USD 372 gift fund.
All seconded.
Second.
All those in favor? 7-0. 5G? I'll move to adopt the resolution 2021-07-10 of authority for district account.
Second.
Move and second. All those in favor? 7-0. 5H?
I move to adopt resolution 2021-7-11 for facsimile signatures.
second.
Move and second. All those in favor? 7-0. 5I?
Move to adopt resolution 2021-7-12 for activity funds.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor? 7-0. 5J?
I move to adopt resolution 2021-7-13, authority for Newton High School accounts.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor? 7-0.
I move to abstain.
No, keep going, I'm curious.
Let's go for it.
5K?
Wing it.
This one we actually
Let's talk about this one.
Yeah.
have before the motion.
We need a volunteer to do the KSB, Government Relations Network, and I'm on the vice president.
Done.
Take that. That's okay with everybody? Okay. I need a motion in a second.
I move to appoint Matt Teresa to serve on the board's representative, as the board's representative to the KASB Governmental Relations Network for the 2020-21 year, including voting rights for the delegate assembly.
Second.
Okay, moved and seconded. All those in favor? 7. Didn't figure it'd be a huge rush to somebody had to do it. 5L, appoint board representative to negotiations. Am I, did I get it right?
Yeah.
Negotiations IBB team.
That's not
I
mine.
have L as district budget timeline.
Right, things are kind of
Yeah.
flipping out of
Well, I was going to say, I have the
So-
negotiations team also.
That's what I have as well.
And mine's budget timeline.
Yeah.
Mine
So-
is CD like
Yeah,
that.
budget
Let's do negotiation.
I got budget time on mine is at the bottom.
And mine's
Oh,
the
mine it isn't. Mine
Melissa's up next.
Oh, mine is.
I have the IDD negotiations
All
team.
right, let's jump to that. All right, let's go to that.
Yeah.
Go for it.
Who wants to be on
You
the
need to talk about
Do you
it.
want to do
Nominate someone else.
Luke, you're gonna be too All right, who's want to lead the?
I'll take one for the team.
That's fine.
All right.
Get to know the teachers well.
I move to approve Melanie Morton as a representative to the IDD negotiations team.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor? 7-0. All right, now for M, I have BOE appointment to the NRC board. And Fred and I had talked about this a little bit, and my thought on this was to do it much like we did to fill the vacancy. Just if people want to do it, please let us know. They can sign up to do it, and we can consider names. We won't have a questionnaire or anything, just.
We had that, you folks have done this several years ago, and Jody knows more than I do, obviously, there's 3 questions to fill out, if you want us to follow
Is that okay with everybody?
Yeah, I think the question is good.
Okay.
You want to clarify what we're talking about?
So what I had done in the past is I've emailed all staff to say there's an opening, who's interested,
Right.
give them the questionnaire. We do have a community person that's interested, or that has expressed an interest.
Right.
So I'll have them fill that out as well.
Right, and so for those of you watching at home, we have a vacancy on the NRC, the rec board, and so if you're interested, you can get hold of Joni and she'll get you a copy of the questionnaire. It's 3 short questions, and submit it, and we'll consider you. And the plan would be to try to do that at the next
Maybe
meeting.
the 27th, July 27th, could be.
All right, that's it. The next thing I have is 5N, COVID planning update, or do we do the budget time? Which one do you want to do?
Go to the budget timeline?
Yeah.
That's fine with me. We can switch that around.
Okay, we'll do 5O, budget, district budget time.
Okay, I'll go ahead and talk about that. So, good evening, everyone. What I wanted to do was actually share a couple of dates that are going to be important for our budget planning, and to make sure that you're aware of what they are. The first one is going to be August 3rd. And so on August 3rd, we'll go ahead and present the budget to the board. Then on August 4th, we will publish the budget. And then on August 17th, we are going to have our hearing and hopefully approval of the budget. And then on August 25th is when we'll file with the county. So again, just making you aware of those dates and the timeline so that you know when the budgets will be finalized.
Just a reminder, that statutory requirement for the 25th of August. So if you have questions, like when you get that printed budget, I'm sure you want to correct them towards date. I used to have to tell my board that last year, but the last 4 years where I was at, because we can't go past that statutory and it causes some problems.
Any questions on that, anybody? Okay. The COVID planning update.
Okay, this is what everybody's waiting to hear, what our wonderful plan is that we're going to have for everyone. And I've communicated with staff, I've communicated with board members about this, but we don't have a plan in place for this, okay? It would be a little bit, to me, way ahead of the game for several reasons. The first one, obviously, I started July 1, okay? So it's kind of hard to really have teams and stuff in place. The second one, we got guidance last Thursday that was released to superintendents and some health people from the Kansas State Department of Education. We need to take that guidance into consideration before we actually really start coming up with plans. An example of why we need to kind of why we need to have waited for that, and also to back up a little bit, those plans won't be approved by the Kansas Board of Education until Wednesday. And then Thursday, there's going to be a release of that information. And then there's a webinar for the general, not for the general public, for school teams, that we're going to have a large group of people that we'll talk about in a few minutes in terms of the 2 different types of teams, try to participate on and learn as much as we can, okay? But, an example of why it was important to wait on that guidance is, one of the things that I know that we have some folks that are concerned about, like the wearing of masks. So when I first got here and meeting with some of the maintenance folks and the health folks, it was, that is an important thing that we are able to provide for all of our people. So I went and directed those folks to purchase 2 cloth masks reusable for each individual, including staff. Then we got the guidance, which would have been about 6 or 7 days after I gave that directive. When you look through the guidance, it says we shouldn't require that in the KSDE guidance. All right, should make it required for up to 5th and 6th graders. Okay, which when you look at that on the surface, that's not a big deal. We just got a few extra masks, but in a school district this size, that's a pretty big chunk of change. And it's not that we shouldn't have bought those masks in the first place. It's just my point in making that statement is we really want to kind of know what our guardrails are so that when we're forming these plans, we can do them well without having to back up a lot, because you all went through some of the same stuff that I did last year, just in different locations. How many changes we had to make during that point in time when continuous learning started, and how many withdrawals we had to make in terms of this direction and that direction and so on. So when we get that guidance that's been approved, our goal is to have 2 different teams in operation. And I've got a timeline in the notes. I'm not going to read through all of that. You guys have that accessible, and it should be in the public content section, so everyone else should be able to see that. But when you see that, what we want to do is create 2 teams. We already have the individuals that we're going to review and try to send that list out tomorrow in the operations section and in the instructional section. Obviously, the instructional side is going to be bigger. That's when a lot of our teachers and other staff are going to be involved. That operations side, though, is so important because those are the things, those are the nuts and bolts in terms of sanitation, the regulations or rules that we're going to have in place with masks, with hand washing, with social distancing, with how do you go from one classroom to another, how do you board the bus, how do you exit the bus, how do you enter the building, how do you exit the building. So when you look at the guidance document, when you guys have access to that, it's like 1,078 pages. Okay, so it's kind of big. The majority of it deals with the instructional side. And the reason it's that big, obviously, is because on that instructional side, they go through how you could look at the essential standards that they're going to identify, and then also come up with sample lessons for that. So that's a large portion of that. The last 100 or so pages is the operations side. And as a teacher or as a staff member, that's the one that everybody's really worried about. It goes back to talking about, are we going to have choice? Are we going to have a blended model where we're going to have partially online, partially in person? Are we going to be full in person? Okay? And I'll be honest with you, I don't see how we can have an everyday full in person to begin with, knowing what we know now. I think we need to get kids in school if we can, okay? Because we have other obligations in terms of custodial care and other things when we start thinking about families that we serve. And I went in a little video that I put out to staff and an email that I put out to all staff, I just had one goal. And you guys had that goal as well. You would have seen that this past weekend. But the general public might not have. That's just to develop a strategic plan for student learning to accommodate students, parents, and staff, so that we can have legitimate and rigorous instruction take place. That was a concern, I know, last year on the part of all staff in that continuous learning time. Was the instruction rigorous enough for our kids? I don't know the school district across the state can say that it was. I really don't, okay? But we need to have that for our kids. The second piece of that is make sure that we address the well-being of all involved, the physical and social and emotional. So I know that we're scared. One of the parents mentioned the mitigation of risk. We're not going to be able to eliminate all risk. I mean, we're not, if we have any sort of in-person attendance. Even if you don't, when you start thinking about, okay, are we having packets delivered? There's always that possibility of the transfer of the virus in that packet, things of that nature. All right. The last part is we want to have the necessary flexibility created within the system to address changes in conditions. If we've learned anything, we learned that we have to be flexible. And that is so hard. And it's really hard if you think of yourself as a teacher that's been in the classroom, doesn't matter how many years, but especially if you're a long-time classroom teacher, this is a tremendously difficult environment to adjust to if you've never had to do it. But I look at it from the perspective of what all schools across the state accomplished last spring. A lot of people learned a lot in a little bit of time. They really, really did. But it was really, really frustrating. We want to remove some of those frustrating parts if we can. Okay? So, our goal is to come to you folks on the 27th with a draft plan of some sort. But that's still going to be a draft plan. I mean, it really is. When you think we're not going to have the official guidance until Thursday. Okay, we aren't. Now, all the administrators and directors have a draft copy. I released that today. We weren't supposed to release it to the general public because we didn't want to get information out there. The state board hasn't considered that yet. They may change some of that. And they've been known to do some of that stuff in the past. So we are going to gather. We'll talk a little bit after that. It's supposed to be a 2-hour webinar. So we'll talk a little bit about, how we should organize and how we should look at this. But then that Monday morning, I think at 8:30, I've got a meeting planned with the administrators where we're going to sit down, because one of the things that I asked them to do was think about what are the common concepts we need to account for as we work through this from each perspective, from the operations and the instructional side. We've got to think about things like communication. Do we have lines of communication up and down the chain? It doesn't matter how good our plan is if no one knows what we're doing. If our health folks don't know what our transportation folks are doing, if our teachers don't know what transportation and what our health folks and what our office folks are doing, it just won't be successful. And so that's one of the things I want to make sure that we do is have those mechanisms in place for communication, which will be really hard the larger you are. Okay? When I was out before with 4 principals and 530 kids, that was pretty simple. I just make a video and send it out, they're on point, right? Okay? With this many people, it's a scale issue for me, so I got to learn that too. Okay? And one of the things that we want is we want board participation on these 2 committees. Because, no matter what's ever been done in the past, my style, or lack thereof, perhaps is a better way to put it, but my style is to involve you folks to the extent that you want to without you micromanaging what we're doing, if that makes any sense. I don't want you micromanaging, but I want you, when you're downtown and somebody asks you a question, you have some way to respond to that with some sort of knowledge. I don't want you in the weeds, I just want you to know where they are. And that's kind of how I look at this kind of stuff a little bit. So when I'm going to ask President Treaster here if he would like to consider appointing someone for operations and someone for the instructional side, we would ask that you participate in those large group meetings. We really, really would, which would include this Thursday at 12:30 in a webinar at a location yet to be determined. We originally scheduled a place, but it's not big enough for social distancing. So we're probably going to end up, we just haven't told the high school principal yet, we're going to probably end up in the auditorium up to the high school. But I haven't even decided that yet, but that's honestly probably where it's going to be. Yes?
Can you describe again the difference between the 2 groups that you want?
You got operations.
You touched on it, but just a little bit more.
Operations is going to deal with like the things that need to take place from an infrastructure, from a health perspective, which would include food service, transportation, sanitation, health services, even getting down to the point, how do we operate in a classroom setting? How do we incorporate social distancing? Okay, when do we need to wear masks? When is it appropriate to maybe not wear masks? Do we require masks? Because that's another one of the big things when we look at some of the data points here. 75% of our staff, actually it's a little higher now. When I printed out the data points that we'll look over in a few minutes, 75% said yes, 25% said no, make a choice. It's a little bit like what we see out in the public right now. Okay, I think about that now. I should have my mask on right now, but if I do, I won't be able to see because it fogs over my glasses. I know that that's an excuse, but that's the only one I got. Because if I want to be able to see, I kind of need. So there's all these little things that come with what we're going to plan. So that operations side, the hard part about that is, okay, if we're determining what some of the guardrails are in terms of classroom operation, only from that operations perspective, and we're not communicating with the instructional side, there will be an inconsistency of message between those 2, and I don't want that to happen. We can't have that happen. Because that's where you have issues in terms of inconsistency with, I don't want to say enforcement because I hate that word, although it has to happen sometime, but inconsistency for how we operate. On the instructional side, what that will mainly entail will seriously be grade level and content area bands. That's where the majority of our educational leaders are going to be in terms of instructional leaders. So our teachers, our content people, our instructional coaches, our support people, that's where they will be mainly. All right? But like I said, we have to have mechanisms between the 2 that allow for that communication to happen back and forth. Does that help?
Thank you.
Yes. The 20th is the planning meeting. I think I've already said that. We want to have some sort of a short a draft plan. And understand this too, we're not going to do this in isolation. We'll look at other people's plans. We'll steal from people. I'm an old science teacher. I'm good at that. I'm good at that, so we'll do that, all right? And then, so for me to tell you I have a plan, you don't want me to come up with your plan. I mean, if you want me to do this in isolation and then it becomes you know, you will do it this way, that's not going to happen. That's not, we can't do that effectively if that's the approach you want me to take. And I know you folks don't want me to take that approach. All right, so we have to involve our teachers in this. And we have to know it's not going to be a kumbaya moment all the time. There's going to be some real struggles because of personalities, because of, you know, I hate to say it, but because of territories. I mean, you know, we're used to doing things the way we're used to doing them, and it's kind of hard to do them any other way sometimes, okay? So there's going to be a lot of stuff that we have to work through when we got to establish trust within those groups, because everyone has to know our purpose is to serve students and families. That has to be who we really, really recognize. You know, not at the expense of any individual, obviously, but we have to recognize what our role is in supporting those students and families. So, Dr. Decker, if you could pull up that little the data points.
There we are.
Okay, now. Sheila had the tech individuals come up with this really great, pretty little tableau charts and graphs and stuff. And that's great. But this morning, when I was going through the parent survey and student, or parent and staff surveys, all right, I'm a little bit like, I just want to see some numbers. And so I'm going to talk about some parent survey highlights and some staff survey highlights. In your content, in the public content, are the results of those surveys that we're sharing up to this point in time, okay? Some of the staff stuff, we haven't been through all the narrative stuff. So when you look at what the parents said, essentially, you know, knowing what we know now, how comfortable are you sending your kids? 1 is very uncomfortable and 4 is very comfortable. So, you know, you got 40, almost 45% that are uncomfortable pretty much.
Do you know how many respondents we had?
Over 1,500 responses.
And is that, so I filled out one survey for 3 students.
Mhm.
Is that, would I be counted as 1 response or 3 responses?
So, if I could speak to that.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
So one thing, when we were setting up the survey, we were trying to make it easier for parents, so you didn't have to do 3 forms.
Thank you, I appreciate that.
That was, thank you to Jody, actually, that helps us crunch all of the data put together. He says it's going to make it easier for me if we do that. So that was the one piece we started with. And then when we broke it down by building, that gave us a better number of how many parents had responded per that many students. And I would guesstimate we were in the 90 to 95% range of parents responding for almost every building across the district. So I feel like we had a very high return on that level.
And remember, these are anonymous surveys, right? And so a person may have filled it out 3 times thinking that they, you know, so, but still, it's great data that you guys got, great return that you got.
When was the survey put out?
At the end of June, right? I think at the end of June, first part of July.
And then was due back?
I don't think there was a date.
Okay.
Okay.
So
And
for a week,
it was out for that long, I
for
think.
about a week.
Was there a due date put on it?
I think it was a-
due date being
I
put on
don't
it.
think so.
That's when we extracted the data. And one thing too, what we wanted, all we wanted from this was just a snapshot. I mean, this isn't a defining moment, so to speak. We just kind of wanted to get a little bit of an idea. Parents will get other surveys as it relates to this stuff, once we kind of have kind of where we think we want to get their input as it relates to that. The next one was learning options. If you want to scroll down a little bit, David. Okay, in terms of, and the question was, which of the following learning options, if available, would you prefer? And then 25% were uncertain, 25%, 26% learning while staying at home, and then 50% wanted physical school attendance. And that was from a district perspective. In the data that you have, it's broken down a lot more. So you can look at those nice little pie charts and stuff when in that data that you're going to have, that you have in your folder. And once again, that's in public content, so if I remember correctly, everyone should be able to access that goes through the board docs, so you guys have that information. The next deals with the staff surveys. That was just put out this past weekend, and these are just screenshots that I took from that survey without them going through the data compiler, the Tableau, whatever they call it, Tableau, that they use. So this is off the Google form itself. And then these were the concerns. What are you most concerned about? This is of the 315 staff members. About 58% said they're concerned with their physical health. And then when you look down that list, physical health of our students, about 61%, if I read that correctly, which I should just be looking at my sheet, not up there. So it gives you kind of an idea of what their concerns are. Only 3% said they have no concerns. So it just gives you a little bit of an idea. And there'll be more staff. I think as of this evening, there were 385 responses.
One quick question, it would be the fourth item where it had 143 responses. What is that representative of?
Is it right below loss of academic value?
Yes.
Yeah, not social distancing or wearing a mask. I don't know why that one didn't show up there.
All right, thank you.
Because it's that same way even on the live stream.
Right, okay.
And Google is great, except for when you try to take pictures of the form results a little bit. It doesn't. The pictures are fine when you try to fill it out. Next one, staff risks and mask requirements. When you look at that, in terms of being identified as at risk, about 35% are in that category. We look at 35% of our staff, and that is obviously something we need to take into account. And the last one below that, that's where, and even when I printed that one off about should we require masks, when I looked at it this morning before I actually took the screenshot, it was closer to 75-25, now it's 76-24. And I think it's a little bit more to where we require a higher percentage of say we should require masks. Okay? So the next is reopening options. Once again, this is on the part of the teachers. Some sort of a hybrid model was at about 55%, 56%, and then in-person learning, 30% at that time. Once again, these numbers have changed and will. And then you look at online learning only as 15%. If you remember back to that parent survey, we did give them an option of a hybrid model. And that's once again, when we ask more information from them, we'll include those kinds of things, all right? And then if we provide online lessons, which would you prefer? If you scroll down a little bit, Dave. When you look at that real-time teaching, recorded lessons, and hybrid of both. I will say, real-time teaching, students have to report during the hours for specific classes. That's a great thing to be able to want to do. One of the things where I was at before, we required an asynchronous component. If you had original or instruction being presented, you had to have a way to provide that in an asynchronous environment. Because if kids aren't there, there's no guarantee that that family is in the position to where they can make sure they're in that presence at that time. And I know as a teacher, I would want that as well. Once again, I got to speak just based upon my previous experience. I had kids, for example, while I was a previous superintendent, they were farmers. And those kids were in the field, they were working. And they just flat out told us, look, the only way we're going to do this, we need our kids to work, is they'll be able to do this after they get out of the fields at 6 o'clock or whatever it is they were doing. And I know we had other families too that said, look, my kid has to work if he's not in school because we've got to pay our bills. So I know as a teacher, finding that balance between that's going to be difficult, but one of the guardrails that I would have an expectation of is that there would be asynchronous capacity with any sort of original instruction or new instruction being delivered. At the time when it's accessible for the kid, not necessarily the teacher. Not that they couldn't have time, obviously, but I think we need to provide that for our families. That's just my opinion, I'm just one person, but I think that's real important because we found that to be a huge issue where I was at before. Thinking about funding associated with this, once again, this changes on a regular basis. We do have a little over $500,000 in COVID funds, and I don't know what was shared with you folks in the past. There's like 12 different categories we could use those funds for. And like the 12th one was pretty generic in that, anything to allow the normal operation of school to take place. But special education, serving at-risk kids, so on and so forth, those were other categories. If you want that list, I can dig back in my stack. That was given to us like in April or May, maybe May or June by the KSD. I just made an assumption, you guys, if you don't have that, I'll be glad to provide that. There are also approximately, or up to like close to $7 million of funds accessible, federal funds to Hardin County. I'm a little fuzzy now, especially after an email that we got this afternoon about how we're going to be able to use those funds. And once again, some of that stuff might change over time, but now like if we want to use it to pay for PPE, personal protective equipment, we have to exhaust all other resources before we can ask them. That kind of wasn't what we heard the other day a little bit. I'm not saying that they're giving us incorrect information, but they just got that information today too from a state source. So, what I'd love to say is, there's all kinds of extra money out there that we could use for these kinds of things. We just don't know. Or with that $500,000 of COVID funds that we have that we can draw down, that's there. But those other funds, now I'm a little bit murkier. David, I don't know if you have anything there that can help explain that more?
I looked a little bit more into it. I think what it is, and again, we'll have to go back and make sure that this is correct, but essentially, if we have a plan to spend down our own COVID relief money, and then we can go ahead and apply for what the county has. So as long as we have our share already earmarked of what it is that we're going to need, whether that be masks, sanitation devices, et cetera, then we can go ahead and apply for that additional funding for things that we don't have budgeted for or that we don't use our own COVID money for. So there's a little bit of flexibility in there. It's not as great as what we initially thought. We thought that we were just going to be able to put forth some grants and hopefully get that accepted, but it's definitely something that we plan on taking full advantage of on behalf of the students of the school district for sure.
Those funds have to be drawn down by December of this calendar year, by the end of December. Whereas the 500,000, we've got well over a year to draw those funds down, which could be used even for next summer for summer school and things like that.
So does that mean our money has to be spent?
No.
Or just
A plan.
a plan for it, and then we can apply for the other?
Right.
Okay.
And there are several deadlines. I think one of them is coming up in the first part of August. It may be that we have to admit that we missed the deadline if we don't have a definite plan. I mean, I don't know. We just got a lot of stuff to figure out.
Is that grant money coming in, or are we gonna have to pay on some of that money depending on what the county does? Because we can't control the county side, and their ball's changing, right? Like, the game plan is changing pretty much weekly.
It's not a grant, it's just federal funds.
Okay, the federal funds though that we get, will we have a note on the back end of that? Like, will we have to pay interest on those monies?
No.
Okay.
These are federal COVID funds designated for the school district, that 500 and some thousand, and then specifically for the county to be used for COVID. So they're different pots.
And the county fund, we don't know how much is there that we can possibly get at this point.
In terms of that, approximately $7 million, or under $7 million, no.
Okay.
One of the things we're going to get, the county superintendents are going to try to get together this week and talk about how that might be, how we might coordinate so that, we're being responsible to Hardin County as it relates to those funds. Yeah, it's kind of crazy, but it's okay. I mean, it's helpful. I mean, hopefully. One of the things too, I put in there, some of the things we have to consider as it relates to some of those funds. We already have like an immediate need for some facilities, infrastructure, things that we need to do. And so like in the health rooms, we need to rearrange those somehow. I know, for example, like in Cooper and at Walton, it really is a pretty extensive physical facility rearrangement. Mr. Schaefer got a couple of preliminary bids that are under the $20,000, that in order for us to have a room for COVID patients, potential COVID patients, okay, and then another one, right, we really need to be able to move on these pretty fast to get that done prior to school. I don't know how it operates necessarily here. Before, where I was at before, they said, hey, as long as you're not doing anything crazy and you show me what you're doing, they were okay with that. But if you guys want us to go through the bid process associated with that, it is under the $20,000. All right, so we don't technically have to put it out for bid, but I want to make sure we're also being good fiscal stewards of our taxpayer dollars. It's just that there's not a lot of time between now and the start of school, and some of those we won't have done between now and the start of school, and we're going to have a portable situation or solution until we do. So we're looking at some glass partitions in a couple of those health rooms that are large enough already. They're actually glass walls, tempered glass walls with a tempered glass door, so they would be permanent. They would give you that opportunity to have two separate places in most of the elementary rooms. Chisholm is a little bit more extensive, all right, and we're looking at more of a not a masonry wall, but a sheetrock wall with a door, just based upon what they need to do from a structural perspective to attach to both the adjacent walls and the rooms big enough. Walton is where we're essentially taking that health area. We would take that health area and really rearrange that along with the principal's office, and there's also another secretary's kind of office in there to create that space. Because in that existing nurse's space, there's not near enough room. Okay. Something similar over in Cooper, and that mainly deals also with traffic flow. Nurse's station is kind of a hallway into like the workroom, and so we have to put some doors and stuff like that in. So, I guess what I'm asking for is, how do you want to direct me to make sure that I can get those things going so we can, address those two larger dollar immediate needs? And I think the smaller ones, it should be okay to be able to get those going.
So what you want to know is, are we okay with you kind of doing this expedited?
Yes.
Is everybody okay with that, or would you like some more control, or?
I'm fine with it. We're going to have to do it one way or another.
Yeah.
And even if we're not in our buildings that are scheduled first day now, it's going to have to be done.
Yeah.
So, and we're needing work, other people will need work. I think we need to just get the ball rolling to get this handled.
Is everybody okay with that? Okay, so,
Anything over the $20,000, obviously we'll follow the bid rules, but like with this, we're just looking at right now only at these things. Good.
It's kind of time sensitive. Yeah.
Also, we're hoping we can get the county to help with some of the infrastructure stuff. We really do. Some other facilities things, just to kind of be aware, Mr. Schaefer's purchasing some aerosol sanitizing attachments for some of our current cleaning things, and it essentially uses a hydrogen peroxide that allows it to react, and it's a relatively safe thing too. So he's already ordered a bunch of those, and as I already told you before, we purchased, it's like $15,000 worth of masks, cloth masks. So we do have those coming as well. My fear was we wouldn't be able to get those in time, but I think we'll be able to now. He's also created some really nice plexiglass barriers that are going to be for all of the office staff, and they're portable as well. So like when they do one stop, they can take those barriers down there for that one stop enrollment, which we've also kind of considered already a little bit. I think we have a plan in place that'll make that to work and work out okay. So there's a lot of little things like that that are kind of taking place kind of behind the scenes and ready to go. But if you have any questions at any point, please holler. I got a whole bunch of notes here that I usually don't pay attention to until I make sure that I covered everything. Some things that you kind of need to be aware of, I think. Like I said before, I'm not sure if like full-time daily attendance on the part of all of our kids every day, the first day, is really, the way it sounds, it's not going to be very likely probably. If anything, we're looking at maybe some sort of a hybrid thing. Also, be ready for me to come to you with plans from the buildings about altering the calendar. For sure, front-loading PD days. Number one, it would give us a little bit of space between when we originally started, or planning to start school, and the cases, and hopefully we could have a little bit of a downplay in the curve, which I don't know if it's going to happen based upon how things are working right now. But we may want to look at some more extensive rearranging of the calendar a little bit to provide some spaces in between for breaks for sanitation, for breaks for teachers to work on creating, more rigorous instructional units based upon some of the stuff we do. So I'm being really vague with you as I'm explaining that to you, but I'm just saying be ready for some calendar requests that you're going, oh my God, we've never done it that way before. But none of us alive have been in a pandemic either. So and we have access to technology stuff that'll help us. But I really think we got to think about parents and families. I've seen some comments like on social media and other places that the teachers aren't babysitters, and I get that, and I'm not trying to be negative towards any teachers that may have made statements like that, because a lot of that stuff is on different social media feeds that I've seen from across the nation. You're right, teachers are not babysitters. But we also have to remember that one of the functions of public education for decades has been custodial care of these kids. Okay, and I think of those families that might lose jobs because they've got to make a decision between, am I going to stay home with kids or am I going to work? We've got a lot of families like that in our school district. We've got them all over the place. It's all over the country. Obviously, it's just what it is. So we got to think about that kind of stuff as we're making these plans. I'd like to somehow think about how we can address custodial care when kids aren't in session in person. I don't know if that's possible. I really don't. But I'd like to brainstorm with those groups to see if it is. Maybe partnering with churches or something like that. I just don't know if that's possible. We also need to think about if we're going to have partial in-person attendance on a rotating basis. What about food service for those kids that aren't in attendance, that need it, that are on free lunches? We have to account for those. We have to provide that service, in my opinion, for those kids. I'll always err on that side. I want to help him. So, I think about it like when I was a teacher and having a young family, man, it was a sure nice thing as a young teacher when the kids could go to school full-time and I didn't have that daycare bill. Number one, we don't have daycare accessible in the community, from what I understand, that would have to be able to accommodate the number of kids that we're talking about. Number two, that financial burden, even if we have that on these families, is just something some of these families can't bear. And so I don't know what that's going to look like. I have no clue. But that's what all the people around here, that lots smarter than I, are going to help with. We got to think of the health needs of our staff, obviously. And one of the parents, the first parent that spoke, we're not going to be able to eliminate the risk. We just need to mitigate it. We have some of those in our high-risk categories. We need to think about how we can help. And so that would be another piece that we need to work on. Haven't even talked about food service and transportation, but when I've been through the guidance documents in terms of transportation, essentially, if you can't social distance, they recommend you wear masks. So those are things that we'll talk about. We haven't talked about masks. Should we require them? Do we give choice? Are there situations like on buses, if you're on there, we can't social distance, you must wear it. But what are those times when we don't have to? This is always a tough one. These kinds of rules are, because unfortunately some of it's become pretty political, which is, it's unfortunate, but the science behind wearing the mask is pretty solid. I think about that as I'm not wearing my mask right now, and only Angela is. It's pretty solid, but, I also think of it, am I willing to kick out a kid or expel a kid for not wearing a mask, like a fourth grader for not wearing a mask? I don't know if I'm ready to do that yet. Or am I ready to fire a teacher for not wearing a mask? I don't know if we're at that point. Maybe we will get there. I don't know. But those are the kinds of things we have to work through. And we also have to remember we're not selling ice cream, so we're going to make some folks mad no matter what we do. We're going to make a bad decision, especially in hindsight, with all the stuff that we come up with. And we've just got to be patient. And people have to be, people have been fine. I mean, I've gotten a lot of emails. You board members have gotten a lot of emails too. And I appreciate the feedback, but we don't have a plan yet. We're going to have something, but we don't have a plan yet. So that's enough talk. What questions do you have for me?
Yeah, I have a question. I know you're only 13 days on the job, but have you guys, anyone from the district office, been partnering with the Harvey County Public Health Officer or the Harvey County Medical Society? Or if you haven't, do we plan on doing that?
Absolutely,
Okay.
yeah, because, I'm not sure about partnering, but like with some of the cases we've encountered thus far in terms of some personnel issues and stuff, we call them first. We call the Harvey County Health Department first, and we get their advice on how we deal with that.
And then there's a couple of them that'll be on the operations team too.
Okay.
Maybe that's just a natural, make the most
All right,
sense.
thank you.
So lots of the emails that we've gotten have referred to people wanting an online, virtual, remote-only situation for their child. Is that something that we will work towards, or will we be just working essentially towards a hybrid model, and if they choose a virtual option, they will go elsewhere, essentially?
We can't open a virtual school right now, okay? But there are regulations that allow us, or there are some guides in terms of counting kids, that allow us to be able to offer, they're calling it, what are they calling it? Remote learning. They're calling it remote learning. So that's one of the things I'd like to be able to give choice. I really would. And that's, once again, where we can maybe use some of those staff for high-risk situations to be able to facilitate those. But that's difficult. And if you've been involved with online learning, it takes a special person to do that well as a student. You have to be a self-regulated kid. So there are requirements where there have to be daily contact, there have to be logs that are kept essentially, the parents signing off and the district signing off as well in order for us to be able to count those kids. I just don't know how well that will work.
I was going to say, and I think we have to reinforce to parents who really want that option that it won't look like it did in the spring.
Not at all.
That was, we were saying elementary, an hour max. This is full school day worth of work, sitting at home, essentially, is what they would request.
There's you guys already have Ingenuity purchased as a sign license in one of your buildings, and that is, where is that again? Opportunity Now, right? Opportunity Academy. That's one of those options. I mean, that's direct instruction. I taught using that system 5 years ago, 6 years ago. So there's accountability, but within that. But, I also know the limitations of it too. And it has controls in there where kids have to watch the whole video. They can't skip through that and all this other stuff. But, that's pretty tough. So it's actually a lot tougher than being in class. Any other questions?
And this may be ahead of where you're at now, and we may talk about this later, and that's fine. I know some people are wanting strictly virtual at this point. And based on what we had in the spring, which is no fault of our teachers, nationally there were struggles because it was thrown together quickly and we didn't know what we were walking into. So some of these parents have expressed that that's not really exactly the place they would like to be with their students. So they're looking at an E-Academy in a different district, which if that's best for your family, I support that 100%. You have to do what you feel is good for your family. If that's the case, how does that work with funding from the state, with our count numbers? Can you explain that to me?
If they go someplace else, if they were going to Smoky Valley Virtual Charter School in Newsport, they get the funding, we get nothing.
Okay.
And that's the way it is. That's why the online learning that she was referring to, if there's some ways that we can do that, for that, I'd like to offer that as an option. I'm just not saying with certainty that we can.
Sure.
Until we dig further into that, we just got that, what the requirements were at the budget workshop about, David and I went to that the 2nd of July.
Not that I want to lose funding, but for individual families, if that's what their kids need, that's the step they have to take. So nothing against them, but I just want to look at it from a district standpoint.
If we can, we're going to try to keep them here.
I would
If we
love
can provide
that.
We'd like to provide that choice.
Sure.
I mean, choice, honestly, if we do this well, it can really set up the future real well. If we look to a competency-based educational environment, it can really check off a lot of boxes that a lot of our parents that have really struggled with public education for years have wanted to check. So, yeah.
I know there's a lot of ifs and buts in there.
Yeah.
I get it. I'm fine with that. Just some basic questions.
Have we, I was in on the special education committee meeting earlier this week, or last week, and so my understanding is there is no change in what they expect from special education.
That's clear. That's what I understand.
Yeah, we have to meet all of those. So that is always tricky, especially if we're talking about reducing, the amount of days that kids are in school. So that's something I think that we really have to spend a lot of time talking about, because clearly our kids with IEPs, special education, are the ones who are already behind, need more attention. And so we don't want them to fall further behind. And so I know it's easy for some people to say, oh, well, let's just go to remote learning. But some of those kids cannot do remote learning. So that's just...
well, and the kids don't want a lot of them want to be back in school.
Right.
I mean, not one of them has said that they enjoyed last spring with the virtual. They would rather be in the building. So I get we have to offer options.
Right, and not to put you on the spot, but to put you on the spot on the heels of Jen's comment, I know you've told me this before, but I don't remember. Roughly how many students do we have with IEPs just as a whole, whether that's special education or it's
We're averaging about 16 to 18% of the district.
Okay. And is that about the same equivalent to other districts in our county?
Yeah, we're a little bit higher. I mean, just our population and our community needs put us a little bit higher than maybe districts our size but located elsewhere. And to piggyback on what Jen was saying too, the guidance from the state not only is the deadlines and things like that, but our previous guidance was that we were not to change IEPs or IEP services based on the adjustments that schools are doing. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. And so that will have to be a bigger conversation if the attendance expectations are changed through the school district. Then we will have to be very careful about how we provide those services so that we can stay in compliance and some student needs and follow the district's plan.
I know, obviously, a lot of these details are yet to be discussed even, but when we talk about adjusting the school calendar and stuff like that, have we considered maybe like extending the school day itself to help make up for some of that time? Not just adjusting days, but extending some curriculum time each day. I don't know if these things are possible, just trying to.
Everything's possible.
Yeah.
You know, you just have to think, I know that, you know, you already got those students there 6 hours a day, having them there 6.5 hours, and then you think about those students, if they're involved in activities, they go into activities, it's already, you know, a long day for some of those, especially the littles. But yeah, nothing is, you know, there's nothing off of any table. Yeah, and I think we have to think about, okay, how do we do activities? Do we do activities?
Are we doing
Are we doing
activities? Yeah.
activities? You know, the JUCOs, so Matt and I were talking, they were talking about moving football seasons to the fall or the spring.
Spring, right.
Holy cow.
Well, then what do, for elementary kids, what do specials look like?
Exactly.
Do we have music, PE, what does that look like with a mask on? So, yeah, lots of things to work out. And I think, I just want to put out there for those watching and for our teachers and staff is, I don't think any of us up here have made any public statements about what we're going to do. We don't know. We haven't even seen the guidelines at this point. So we hear you, and we are trying to balance all of that. And I can assure you, myself, I've lost lots of sleep trying to figure out how do you put all the facets together and make it work, and keep people safe, and that includes everyone, students, staff. It's not going to be a perfect situation for any of us, and we are just going to have to offer grace. I know we say that over and over, but we do have to offer grace because no one's going to love. There's not going to be a solution where 100% of our community backs us. It doesn't exist. So I think moving forward, if we can all just kind of reserve our judgments until we can get our feet under us to figure out what we can do.
Well, and I would like to share, since you brought this up, what the Academy of Pediatrics said on their webpage. They strongly advocate that the goal should be to have students physically present in school. This should happen with careful measures to keep students and staff safe and with the flexibility to adapt as needed to the community's prevalence of COVID. And I think that says it in a nutshell of what needs to happen in our own community.
So it sounds like we'll have a working document on the 27th.
That's our goal.
And
Yes.
so
Not some sort of
that
plan.
working document that we can say, okay, here's some framework, given the operations and instructional leadership systems that have been put in place and beat up and dissected from all the different angles and data points that we need. And from there, we can have something to share.
Absolutely.
So we can kind of talk ourselves into the ground right now, but we gotta wait for that. And then join in with you, because you're asking for some support and finding a couple people for operations and instructional leadership, not to micromanage, but to be a part of the process.
Absolutely.
So that's where we're at.
Could you remind us and the public, the board has not seen the guidance from the state yet. I think a lot of people are under the assumption that we have, and we have not. When will we receive some of that information? And that's not negative towards you. just-
No, when Dr. Watson says I can share it, and I will say I shared that with the board president today. And only because when we were, yeah, so, and I'm not trying to throw him under the bus, so then Jimmy could do it right away. But I'm not gonna lie, either when you ask that question, it's like I'm not gonna lie to you, I just not, it's done. Yeah. So yeah, the reason I'm not is because I don't want to put you in a position where, you know, you have to say, well, that's not what the guidance says, or whatever. And really, Dr. Watson has been very clear about, he doesn't want that to get out in the public, although we know that it has, because some of the papers have received it, because they're making comments, and that's another one of the things you'll see, that they're requiring this, requiring that. No, this is guidance, okay? They're recommending.
You don't want to lay concrete.
Pardon me?
You don't want to lay concrete, because it's a moving document itself.
Yeah.
And you made that quite clear.
Yeah.
So we don't want to jump the gun, we want to have all our information, know where are our boundaries to create more boundaries. We don't have that. So.
And I want you to assume, and I want everyone to assume good intent. I mean, honestly, that's the biggest thing, is if we could just take that first and say, I want to assume good intent, that they didn't mean to leave out this piece, or they didn't mean to leave out me or whatever. We've got to have that opportunity to do that, because we're gonna mess some of this stuff. I mean, I already ordered too many masks, right? I think about that kind of stuff, and that's an easy thing in hindsight to criticize, but I made that decision based upon the information I had then. We're gonna make, just like we were making decisions about how to tap into the $6.8 or $9 million, and then we get an email today, no, it's gotta change a little bit. So we just gotta have time to let the process work. We haven't even started.
I agree with you, actually stole the words out of my mouth. I didn't mean that in a negative way of giving you information.
Oh, no.
Part of me is like, I don't want to know. But on the other side, I think it's important, exactly what you said, this is a process. The board has not been given secret information, we've made a plan. That's not happened. We haven't received the information, we haven't had a chance to look over it, dive into it. So tonight is our first discussion about this. There have been a lot of accusations up to this point. I think a lot of people are anxious, myself included. I've got kids in 3 buildings, maybe, this year. We get that, we feel that 6 of us have students in this district. This is a process, and I want answers just as much as everybody else does, but we don't have them yet, and that's okay. I'm okay with that. I know we're working toward it. I just don't want the feeling to be out there that we all have this information and we're plotting, because we don't, and we're not.
And we have some secret plan that we're gonna put out like 2 days before school starts. But we really just don't have any idea right now.
Well, it's the worst time in the history of superintendents to make a transition.
Congratulations.
I mean, where I was at before, I could apply the context because I knew it, now I don't. And so,
Welcome aboard, friend.
yeah, I mean, and it's a real poor excuse, but it's the only one I've got that's legitimate, right? But I think about that really, there are other school districts that are ahead. I know other school districts that are taking plans, preliminary plans, to their boards of education tonight for approval. We're not there. But like I said before, I was working until June 30 in another district, and they would pay me, you guys weren't. So I had to take care of that obligation. I was going to make sure I did that.
One of the NGEs, I think we could read tomorrow and ask for all that data that's out there and what other people are doing.
Oh, yes. And they're great about sharing.
And on that note too, Mallory, the state board isn't going to actually vote on that plan until Wednesday, this coming Wednesday. So I think that's important too,
Very
that,
much.
Well, there's a process.
Yeah.
Either way, I understand it from some meetings that I've done online, that the superintendent's got the preliminary guidelines last week, and now the state board has to act on it, and then, we have to rely on the health department for each county to help guide us in what works, and then we have to implement that in our buildings, and how to best do that and protect everyone, but yet provide the rigorous learning that you talked about. Because I think that was one thing last spring that parents and students had a big issue with, was, the learning, it was difficult in that short time, but, we know more now, so, we can try to plan for better.
You know better, you do better.
And while I'm concerned for all students in our state, I will be selfish that our goal is for our students, our 373 students. So this guidance from the state covers a lot of different areas. And I think it's good that we, along with everyone else, does have local control, because our community does not look like so many others, whether negative or positive. So when we take this guidance from a whole as a state, we have to narrow it down and do what our district needs and what will meet the needs of our kids. And while it's great to steal ideas, and I'm all for that 100%, when we're comparing to other districts, they might not have the same needs as us. They might have more resources than we do. So it's great to look at that, but I think for us especially, we're gonna have to be selfish and think about our 373 kids as we move forward, because those are the kids that we're serving right now.
Absolutely. With the timelines of the process and when the plans are coming out, I'm curious, to relieve some anxiety or give us more time to look at the data, how disruptive would it be, or how early could we start talking about adjusting the start of the school year to a later time? I know that's one of the things that a lot of the emails we've been getting from concerned teachers and just fellow citizens. They've been talking about, could we at least start maybe after September? And that way we can see what's going to happen with all these new cases we've had here in Harvey County. And I mean, I can, in my own head, entertain that idea. It seems like it makes some sense, but how disruptive would that be? And how much is it maybe too early to talk about that since we don't know the recommendations from the state?
It's not at all too early. What you have to consider then is we have the statutory requirement for the number of hours. So we would just have to, we could talk about some of the things like Jennifer was saying, do we increase the length of time in the day then if we were to do something like that? We take all those PD days that were spread throughout the year, or take most of them, put them in the front. You look at maybe even altering spring break. You know, like some of the colleges and stuff have removed like spring breaks or remove fall break, and they end early and stuff. I'm okay. I think we need to really know that we're not going to probably start with kids on that day in August. I mean, that just has to kind of, I just don't know what day it would be that we would start. It just depends upon what we want to put. You guys are the only ones that have a vote. I don't. You know, so if you say, hey, we want to go September 1st or whatever, or after Labor Day, then we figure that out. You know, I'd kind of like to get the teams together to see what they feel like on the operations and instructional before we did that. So, you know, I don't think, especially if people are listening now, by the 27th of July, when we come back to you, yeah, we'll have some pretty good recommendations by the way. And I will be communicating with staff and with you guys about the things that are happening with those teams. You know, I mean, we'll figure out ways to where we're getting that feedback to our staff. And it's not that we're not going to share with the public, it's just that, you know, our staff needs to know kind of what's going on so we can get their feedback. I anticipate having a lot of staff members involved. That instructional team, for example, you know, we're looking at, you know, K through 12 in terms of the instructional manager, actually pre-K through 12. But we want to get a lot of those other teachers that are in those content areas and grade levels involved in that planning too. So really, you're looking at a lot more than around 50 people with their hands in this pie. I want as many as we can. They're trying to give us good information. Great questions. What else?
I saw one of the resolutions we had something about hours in it. You just mentioned like making sure we're tracking hours. How would it work? How would you be tracking hours with this hybrid program? Is that going to be a brand new animal? Or?
It is.
Okay.
And some of the things they talked about, yeah, well, that's a great question. And this is something that we consider. If we could shift to a purely competency-based education, you know, there's talk about like, I don't want to say removing the requirement, but, you know, we don't have to worry about that 1,116 hours. Now, I'm not sure how that will work because that is a statutory requirement. So, you know, there are ways that we can do that. That's what I'd love to get. But I didn't think we could do that like within the first 4 weeks of me being the superintendent of the district. So it goes back to that choice we're providing for parents. Yeah, I'd love to look at that, but that's not something I want to say too much because that would scare the heck out of some people when we start talking.
And part of that is a state issue of how they're going to make requirements or changes to hours. That's not our control either.
Well, they're telling us that, you know, if you miss time because of this and can't follow the guidelines they have for that virtual model, that virtual learning, then you have to make up all of those hours. That's what we're being told. So that statutory requirement will not be realized.
Which is significantly different than what we dealt with this past spring.
Every school across the state applied for a waiver for the remainder of those hours. And that was also legislation that was approved that allowed us to do that.
Sure. How are they calculating virtual hours? So if it's a hybrid?
Well, if it's virtual, we can't do that anyway because that deadline is passed in terms of an actual virtual school.
Right.
But in terms of the hybrid, there's like 4 or 5 criteria you have to meet, which, you know, I could find that list to you and send that to you.
I was just curious.
Yeah, it's not that big of a deal, but it just becomes a, you know, you have to figure out a system to where that's legitimate because the auditors will check that to make sure we've done it. Yeah.
Well, it sounds like there's just requirements for each thing that you have to meet in order to meet those standards.
Sure.
So, we're just working through all of that.
And we think about, like, on the instructional side of that, like, what they've tried to do is narrow down what they're calling those essential standards. And so you guys remember the old Delta standards from the old days of state assessment. Okay, it's a little bit different from that, but they've also tried to put together a lot of cross-curricular examples so that teachers can do some collaboration with some of that stuff. So they're providing some pretty good stuff, but I just can't wait to hear how they explain that in more detail on Thursday. So if you want to figure out to appoint someone, if you would like to do that, or
We had talked earlier today, and so I reached out to Mallory and Jennifer. Jennifer said she'd be willing to be on the operations. Is it a committee or working group? What do you call it?
team.
Team, I'm sorry. Operations team, I'm sorry. And Mallory will do the instructional team.
and that's really all I have unless you guys have other questions. That's a lot of time.
So Thursday,
Thursday, 12:30? Yeah. And we'll put out exactly where, but honestly, it'll probably be in the auditorium. I just want to be able to social distance.
Okay. So any other questions, anybody? All right, I think the last item is adjournment. Or no, board comments. Get ahead of us. Board comments.
Andy, that's the seat that starts with board comments.
So if there's anything you'd like to say?
As long as it's within 15 seconds.
I'm really excited to be here at this table with all of you guys, and I'm looking forward to being a part of the team, and kind of new to the group, so there's a lot to learn fast, and baptized by fire, right? It's getting on. And it's interesting, the comments and the information coming in online, to see what you guys have been going through and dealing with, and how you're communicating with people, even for 4 or 5 days. It's pretty amazing, the responsibilities, but I'm honored to be here. I'm excited to learn, and I promise you guys I'll work real hard, so I'm just excited to be here.
Well, welcome, Andy.
Thanks.
And I just want to say thank you to Fred for all the communications that you have been putting forth and keeping everyone updated as to the happenings and thoughts that are going through this whole process. So thank you for that.
Welcome Andy and Fred, and had a nice conversation with Fred last week, and I'm excited for all the challenges ahead.
Welcome to Andy again. I feel like with David and Fred, we're finally getting going. Now we're at the table, let's do this. I appreciate all the work that you guys are doing. I know that it's all day, every day. And I know it's probably hard to work all day, every day, and read new information that's changing constantly, and then not be able to put a lot of information out there. That's frustrating. So I'm sorry for that, but thank you for everything you're doing. I appreciate it. So I trust the process. I trust you guys. I'm looking forward to this, I guess. It's all about attitude, right?
It is.
Yeah, only reasons to be optimistic moving forward. I'm very excited with where we're at, and our new team members, Andy included, welcome to the board. Glad to have you. It's going to be a good time. I feel very positive about USD 373 and where we're headed. So, to all of our concerned citizens that have been emailing us, thank you for reaching out. That's good communication. That's part of the process. We're definitely taking your voices into consideration. So thank you for everybody that's reached out, and thank you for all the hard work you're doing, Fred. Yeah, we've got a lot to work through, it sounds like, in the next month. Yeah, it's going to be fun. You're the right man for the job, though. Thank you.
We're saying that in a year.
I'll echo everybody else's welcome, Andy. We're very excited to have you on our team and to work with you. And welcome as well to Fred. I just want to say that just the short time you've been actually working with us and everything that you had come down your way, I very much appreciate your style of leadership. And while you may say, I still don't know what I'm doing, it is reassuring to me that you seem to be very confident in making decisions and being able to support them. And so I want to thank you for that, because this is a very uncertain time for all of us. So having leadership that we can trust is just a really good feeling. So thank you.
Welcome aboard, Andy. Great to have you. And Fred, I just want to echo this. This is almost like being here on a funeral,
I
isn't
don't
it?
like this very
We don't vote on that.
No, we talked earlier today quite a little bit, and, this is a lot like, it reminds me of back in the military. The military plans are only as good until the first shot's fired, and that's where we're at. And we can plan, and we can, right up until the first day of school, and then we've just got to, in another military thing, is Semper Gumby. Always Gumby, and we're just going to have to be flexible. And I think what I'm hearing from staff is that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to get our hands around this, and I think the most important thing for us is to try to stay out of the way and let the professionals do it. And I think you're going the right direction. I think the staff, I like the way you're getting people involved. It all looks good, and we got a lot of kids that we're responsible for, and that's our priority. And I appreciated your comments along those lines. So, good luck. All right, I'll entertain a motion.
I move to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor? 7-up. We're out of here.
I have a form for all of you to sign.
Now let's talk.
I'm going to put this up here, and if you can just divide it by the
Do you want us to leave our computers out or put